I will tell you how it really went. And I won't dress it up because pretty stories never saved a child, and mine had two who needed saving. Mason and Tyler, 3 years old, labeled for life by people in white coats, and a father who had built his heart into a locked room after losing his wife, you know what I mean. So the morning it broke open started with Jonathan Rutherford holding a tablet at me like a charge sheet and saying, "Did you really think no one would notice?" And I said, "Notice what, Mr. Rutherford? Because I have learned to keep my hands still when powerful men try to make me flinch." And then from the hallway, we heard this tiny sound, not a cry, not a random reflex, a deliberate little yes, and everything you think you know about what is possible started to tilt. He stormed down to the twins' room, and I followed calm on the outside, praying on the inside, and when he opened the door, he saw what I had been seeing for weeks. Mason, upright against his pillow, eyes tracking me like he had chosen a star and meant to keep it. Tyler gripping a toy the way you grip purpose when it finally shows up on your own floor, and Jonathan said, "This is impossible," like the sentence could make it so, and I told him, "Hello, my love," to Mason, and that boy reached for me with both arms and made a sound that meant yes, in a language no report had ever respected, and Tyler answered with his own little hey, and the air in that room changed. Not because a miracle dropped out of the ceiling, but because somebody finally talked to them as people and waited. I had been hired 6 weeks earlier to keep things tidy and help with routine. I had nursing training and references that looked neat enough on paper. But what I really brought was stubborn belief and a notebook. I took the hospital out of that nursery and put a home back in, pulled down the charts that turned them into diagrams, taped up messy drawings, scattered toys where children actually leave them after play, put on real kids' songs, and I sat on that rug and talked about colors and spoons and clouds and the way a crumb is still bread. And when you do that long enough, the quiet in a child becomes a door, not a wall. Yeah, that happened. Jonathan had reasons for his distance. Reasons with a name, Caroline, who died bringing the boys into the world. And grief can turn a father into a CEO of survival. So for 3 years, he had outsourced tenderness to specialists and wrapped his boys in protocols that never once asked. The oldest question we have, are you really listening? So when he saw what he saw, he did what men like him do, he bought more. Certainty flew in a neurologist with a reputation, big enough to land its own plane, a behavioral therapist with a Harvard line, a development expert with enough publications to build a bookshelf, and they ran their evaluations and came back with words that rang like bells against the old diagnosis: cognitive awareness, deliberate motor control, social recognition, inconsistent with prior assessments, and Jonathan watched me on the security feed and told himself it wasn't scientific, while he watched a spoon meet a mouth on purpose, a pause become a choice, a song turn into a bridge the boys could cross. Then Dr. Patricia Morgan knocked silver hair reading glasses on a cord, a retired neurobiologist who had known Caroline, and she sat on the floor with me for almost 2 hours, asking questions that belonged to the truth, not to a billing code. And when she asked about my training, I told her the honest version that still fits in one breath most of what I know. I learned on rugs with kids and from mothers who notice what the experts do not, plus years of catching patterns. The paperwork smooths over, and she nodded, like a person who knew this story wasn't finished. That night, Jonathan started calling my references, one number dead, one family with no kids at all, a third who said I'd been the first to name a misdiagnosis that was quietly poisoning their son with the wrong meds, that I took notes like I was building a case because I was. And after those calls, Jonathan sat in his office and let the wall inside him crack just enough to consider that he had been managing his pain by believing the worst, not because he is a bad man, but because certainty is a soft pillow if you never lift your head. The next morning, I did what you do when a system has been feeding on a family. I laid out the proof, my notebook open, audio files queued, a stack of medical records with handwriting in the margins, and I said, "We can yell later. First, we need a narrative and evidence," and I played him doctor. Patterson's voice recorded when he thought he was making small talk with a quiet maid, saying Cade was fragile after the loss, and a permanent disability label would be easier than living with uncertainty. And then he mentioned the $50 million trust for lifelong medical care that would revert to charity if the boys recovered. And I did not look at Jonathan's face because you never stare at a man while the ground moves under him, you just keep going. And the next recording was Dr. Stevens telling Patterson the boys were responding to complex stimuli and asking how long this charade could last, and Patterson saying, "Relax, as long as Jonathan needs the story, and our annual consult fees stay aligned, no one gets hurt." And I slid over a printout of transfers shells that all led back to the same office park, and then the hair toxicology results, sedative levels that any court would call abuse, day after day, month after month. Jonathan covered his mouth with his hand and finally asked who ordered the tests, and I said I did, because I am not here to keep the lights low for men who profit off shadows. And I handed him the card for the prosecutor, who had already reviewed the basics, Maria Santos, white collar, and medical fraud. And right then the doorbell rang like a cue, and Dr. Patterson walked in with his perfect pen and said, "How are our little patients, then?" He heard his own voice coming from the tablet and went sheet white. And Jonathan said, "This is the last day you call my children patients," and the investigators stepped in and did their job. The months after were not easy or cinematic. They were forms and depositions, and new specialists with clean hands and true eyes. They were nights when the boys woke up laughing at something only they could see. And we laughed too, because joy finally lived in the house again. They were parents calling from other states, whispering that their child had been asleep for years and asking how to wake them up. They were headlines with words like network and conspiracy, and a judge who did not flinch when the numbers came out. 6 months later, Mason was running in the hall. Tyler was arguing about whether dinosaurs could sing. The nursery sounded like a home and not a clinic. And a jury had done more than balance a ledger, it had said, sentences out loud. Patterson got years that will not give us back what was taken, but still matter. Others lost their licenses and their arrogance. The civil damages funded a foundation and a standard. The law finally wrote down independent second opinions before any permanent disability label for a child medication audits. When progress stalls, randomized external review. When sedation extends without clear benefit. People called it the Rutherford Protocol, and for once the name attached to money, attached to mercy. Later, Jonathan brought me out on the deck and made an offer that did not come with a trap run, the foundation, find the families, train the professionals, write the playbook that keeps the next house from going dark. And I told him yes, as long as the twins always come first, and he said they already do. And then he handed me papers that said what our daily life already knew, that I was more than a caregiver to these boys, that love can be written down so other people stop questioning it. And I said yes to that too, after thinking and praying and breathing through the fear of being happy again. Years later, we are still here. The foundation has helped hundreds. The boys are 7 and unstoppable and loudly curious. And when people ask where the turning point was, I tell them, it is not the arrest or the check or the policy. It is a small hand reaching up and a father finally sitting on the carpet. He used to step around. It is a woman everyone underestimated telling the truth long enough that the truth had to answer back. Some of you will ask about the recordings and the hair samples and the dosages I tapered with careful help before the new doctors caught up. And I hear the ethical questions. I really do, so here is my answer and my ask. A rule that protects a lie is a broken rule, and a lie that cages a child is a crime. So where do you draw your line right now? Because lines mean less after the harm is done. Tell me in the comments if you think I went too far or not far enough. Tell me about the expert your family trusted who turned out to be a salesman. Tell me about the bus driver or the janitor or the grandma who noticed what a whole hospital missed hit. Like, if you believe second opinions save lives, subscribe. If stories like this help you breathe a little easier, and if you've lived something like it, speak up, because sometimes the door a child needs is the one voice that refuses to shut up and sit down.